He glanced down at the screen and grimaced, answering reluctantly. His expression darkened as he spoke, and I felt a small knot forming in my stomach, sensing something was off. Sorry, guys, Mike said, finally looking genuinely upset. Emergency at work. Server crashed again and they're losing clients. I have to head back right now. You're joking? I muttered, feeling disappointment sink in. This trip had been his idea after all. I wish I was man. Mike sighed, grabbing his coat and keys. Look, you two can stay. The cabin's booked for the whole weekend anyway. I'll sort this out and be back as soon as I can, probably by tomorrow night. Laura looked concerned but quickly reassured him. It's okay, Mike. Handle your work. Jack and I will be fine. I hesitated, feeling unsure. Being alone with Laura was something I'd never anticipated, let alone prepared for. Maybe I should head back too, I suggested weakly. Laura shook her head softly, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Jack, don't be silly. Stay and relax. The weather's perfect today. There's no reason for both of you to leave. Her touch, gentle yet firm, lingered on my shoulder a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes met mine, filled with genuine warmth, but also something unreadable, something that made my pulse quicken unexpectedly. Mike quickly hugged his mom goodbye, clapped me on the shoulder, and promised to be back soon. Within minutes, he was gone, leaving a sudden silence between Laura and me. Coffee, she asked lightly, breaking the awkwardness. I brought some really good beans from home. Coffee sounds perfect, I answered, relieved she was steering us into familiar territory. We sipped our coffee in silence, at first standing by the large window. The scenery outside was calm, pristine, serene. Laura eventually turned toward me, leaning gently against the counter, her posture relaxed yet poised. I really appreciate you staying, Jack. Honestly, I could use some company, she said, her voice softer than before. It's been rough lately. I nodded, sensing her vulnerability. I'm glad to be here, I replied honestly. It's been a while since I just slowed down and breathed. Plus, the scenery isn't too bad either. I smiled, gently trying to lighten the mood. She laughed softly, her eyes twinkling. Well, I promise to be good company. You always are, I said, without thinking, immediately feeling heat rise to my cheeks. Her gaze lingered on mine a moment longer than usual. You've really changed, Jack. Grown up. In a good way. I looked down at my coffee, my heart suddenly thumping hard in my chest. Thanks, Laura. You're still just as beautiful as ever, I blurted out, surprising even myself with my honesty. She blushed softly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Careful, she teased lightly, her voice low and gentle. You might make an older woman blush. I laughed awkwardly, breaking the tension. But inside, my emotions were swirling, confusion mixing with excitement. What was I feeling? Why was her simple presence having such a profound effect on me? We spent the afternoon hiking the conversation, gradually becoming easier, more comfortable. We talked about life dreams, disappointments, and hopes. With each step, each word shared, I felt closer to her, no longer seeing her as just Mike's mom, but as Laura, a woman whose presence captivated me completely. As evening approached, clouds began forming in the distance, turning darker, hinting at snow to come. Back inside the cabin, we began preparing dinner together. The air between us charged but somehow comforting. She laughed more freely, eyes sparkling, her earlier sadness temporarily lifted. You know, she said, suddenly stirring a pot of soup, I can't remember the last time I felt this relaxed. I paused, chopping vegetables, looking up at her softly. Me neither. Good, she smiled gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe this weekend was meant to happen exactly like this. Outside, the sky darkened further, the first flakes of snow drifting down, silently unnoticed by both of us. We were too lost in the warmth of the kitchen and the unspoken connection that had quietly formed between us. Neither of us knew that this gentle snow was just the beginning of a storm that would soon isolate us completely, forcing us closer together than we ever imagined possible. After the quiet dinner, I planned to rest briefly and then head back to town later that evening. Though Laura was wonderful company, the thought of staying overnight with just the two of us made me slightly uneasy. I didn't want things to become uncomfortable or complicated. Around 8 o'clock, I double-checked my belongings, grabbed my coat, and picked up my bag, preparing to leave. Laura stood by the large window, her expression slightly concerned as she peered outside. Jack, I think the snow's picking up, she said, turning toward me, her voice carrying a note of worry. I walked to stand next to her, looking out into the growing darkness. Outside, heavy snowflakes swirled aggressively, covering the ground, rapidly driven by strong, relentless gusts of wind. The trees swayed heavily under the storm's force. I think I still have time, I said, trying to sound confident, though I felt uncertainty tightening in my chest. Laura shook her head gently, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. Jack, the road down the mountain gets dangerous when it snows like this. It might be safer if you stay here tonight. I hesitated, torn between the practicality of staying and the awkwardness I anticipated from doing so. Suddenly, a powerful gust slammed into the cabin, making both of us jump. The cabin walls creaked under the wind's pressure and the lights flickered slightly. We exchanged a startled glance, understanding immediately that the choice had just been made for us. Laura quickly moved to the front door, cautiously opening it only a crack, before immediately shutting it again. Cold air and snow rushed inside, confirming our fears. The path leading down from the cabin had vanished beneath a thick white blanket of snow. "We're completely stuck now," Laura whispered softly, trying to mask her anxiety. I sighed, softly nodding in agreement. "Looks that way." Laura looked around the room briefly, then offered me a reassuring smile. "Well, it's okay. We've got plenty of food, enough firewood. We'll be fine." We quickly set about making preparations for what promised to be a long, cold night. I stepped outside briefly to gather more firewood from the pile beside the cabin. Each time I ventured out, I struggled against the biting wind and stinging snow, feeling oddly protective knowing Laura was relying on me. When I came back inside, Laura had already arranged the fireplace neatly. I knelt beside her, carefully arranging logs and kindling. Occasionally, our hands brushed against each other, unintentionally sending unexpected jolts through my body. I felt my pulse quicken slightly each time. Eventually, the fire caught, sending warm, comforting light dancing across the walls. Laura sighed in relief, brushing her hair softly back from her face. Turning to me, her eyes were filled with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I was alone here right now." "It's no problem, Laura," I replied quietly, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm glad I could help. Honestly, I'm grateful you're here too." Laura fell silent, studying me intently for a moment. As if suddenly self-conscious, she stood up and moved toward the small kitchen area. "I think some hot tea would help," she suggested lightly. "It'll calm our nerves." I agreed quickly and followed her into the small kitchen. The limited space forced us into close proximity, and several times we accidentally bumped into each other. Each touch made my heart beat a little faster, each apology spoken with nervous laughter. Laura seemed to sense my awkwardness, smiling softly to ease the tension. Once the tea was prepared, we returned to sit together on the sofa beside the crackling fire. Laura pulled her feet up, curling herself beneath a soft blanket, the warmth of the tea reflecting in her gentle expression. I sat close beside her, painfully aware of the dwindling distance between us. We sipped our tea quietly, staring into the flames, the silence between us comfortable yet charged. Finally, Laura spoke softly, breaking the quiet. "You know, Jack, it's been a long time since I've allowed myself to feel this peaceful." I glanced at her gently, curiosity overcoming me. "What do you mean?" She hesitated briefly, then admitted quietly, "Ever since my divorce, I feel like I've had to hold myself together constantly, never showing weakness. But right now, here with you, I finally feel like I don't have to pretend." Her honesty touched me deeply. I turned toward her fully, my eyes filled with genuine understanding. "I had no idea you felt that way, Laura," I admitted softly. "For what it's worth, I've always thought you were incredibly strong. Mike always talks about how proud he is to have you as a mom." Laura laughed quietly, a sound tinged with sadness. "Mike tends to idealize me. I've done my best to hide my vulnerabilities from him. Sometimes I wish someone could see past all that strength." "I see you," I found myself saying before I could stop, my voice low but steady. "You're allowed to be vulnerable. You don't always have to be strong." Laura studied me quietly for a moment, her eyes glistening in the firelight, clearly moved by my words. A delicate, almost shy smile appeared on her lips. "Jack," she whispered softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't know how much it means to hear you say that." My heart pounded, and I found myself unable to look away from her. In that intimate moment, the reality that she was my best friend's mother seemed distant, overshadowed by the undeniable warmth and connection blossoming between us. The storm continued to howl fiercely outside, piling snow high around the cabin, effectively isolating us from the rest of the world. Yet here, by the warm glow of the fire, wrapped in this unexpected intimacy, I felt no fear. Instead, I sensed that the boundaries between us were slowly dissolving, giving way to something deeper and far more complicated than either of us had anticipated. The soft crackling of the fire filled the small cabin, mingling gently with the howling winds outside. Snow continued to pile up, blocking every pathway down the mountain. It was clear we were stranded here at least for tonight. Yet, oddly enough, I felt no anxiety. Instead, a deep calm enveloped me, the warmth of the fire, and Laura's comforting presence creating an unexpected sense of intimacy. Laura had found some simple ingredients in the small kitchen, preparing a modest dinner of bread, cheese, and dried fruits. We settled down side by side on the sofa, sharing our meal quietly, our knees occasionally brushing against one another. I felt my heartbeat quicken slightly with each small touch. After a few moments, Laura set down her plate, gently gazing thoughtfully into the flickering flames. I watched her carefully, sensing there was something heavy weighing on her mind. Eventually, she sighed softly, breaking the comfortable silence. You know, Jack, after my divorce, I thought things would be easier, simpler. But the truth is, everything felt much harder. She admitted softly, her eyes still fixed on the fire. I turned toward her, giving her my full attention. In what way, I asked, gently encouraging her to continue. Laura hesitated slightly, then smiled weakly. At first, it was a relief. I felt free from years of tension, arguments, and unhappiness. But soon the loneliness set in. The house felt so empty even though Mike was there. And after he left for college, it just became so silent. Her voice trembled slightly and she took a shaky breath. I never thought loneliness could feel so heavy, you know? Her vulnerability touched me deeply, making my heart ache with empathy. I'm really sorry you went through that, I said earnestly. No one deserves to feel that alone. And I can't even imagine how tough it must have been. She turned to face me, her gentle eyes glistening with gratitude and something deeper, more fragile. Thank you for listening, Jack. I haven't talked about this to anyone, not even Mike. I didn't want to burden him. You're never a burden, Laura, I replied softly, meeting her gaze directly. Mike loves you, but I understand why you kept it to yourself. Sometimes it's easier to carry things alone, even if it hurts. Laura nodded, wiping a single tear from her cheek. Exactly. But tonight, sitting here with you, somehow it's different. It feels safe. I don't know why. I swallowed hard, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I feel it too. I confessed quietly, surprising myself with my own honesty. She smiled softly, almost shyly, before glancing back toward the fire. Tell me about yourself, Jack. I feel like I barely know you even though you've been Mike's friend for years. I leaned back against the sofa, feeling oddly comfortable and at ease as I began to share. There's not much to tell, honestly. I've always been kind of quiet, more comfortable behind a camera lens or on a quiet hike than at any loud party. I suppose that's why I'm drawn to design and photography. I get to capture the beauty in things most people overlook. Laura's eyes sparkled with genuine interest. I think that's wonderful. You see the world differently. More clearly, maybe. I smiled at her kind words. Maybe. But it can also feel isolating. It's not always easy to connect with others when you're always observing from a distance. She tilted her head thoughtfully. Yet here you are connecting with me right now. My pulse quickened again. I shifted slightly, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. Well, maybe that's because I feel like you understand. You know what it feels like to stand apart, to feel disconnected. Laura's expression softened further, her gaze gentle and understanding. You're right. I guess that's another thing we have in common. It's strange how easy it is to open up to you. I could say the same, I said quietly, almost whispering. She moved slightly closer, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Our shoulders now touched gently, and neither of us pulled away. I was painfully aware of her warmth, her closeness, and the way her hair fell softly around her shoulders. Laura hesitated briefly, then spoke softly. You know I've spent most of my life putting everyone else's needs first, being strong for Mike, for my ex-husband, even for my friends. But tonight, for the first time, I don't feel the pressure to hold everything together. You shouldn't have to, I whispered. You deserve someone who sees past that strength and takes care of you too. Laura's eyes locked onto mine and I saw her swallow nervously. Her voice was barely audible as she spoke. I haven't talked to anyone like this in years, Jack. My heart was pounding in my chest and I could barely think straight. Yet somehow my words came easily, honestly. Neither have I. I mean, not this openly. I always keep things hidden, afraid to burden anyone else. But it feels natural to share with you. Laura's eyes shone with quiet emotion, and I could sense the barriers between us slowly dissolving. In this quiet cabin, trapped by a storm and separated from the outside world, we had created our own small haven of honesty and vulnerability. Nothing else mattered but this moment, this shared connection. After another comfortable silence, Laura spoke again, her voice tinged with quiet curiosity. Have you ever been in love, Jack? Her question caught me off guard. I hesitated briefly before answering honestly. I've thought I was in love once or twice, but looking back, it was never really deep enough. Not like I imagined love should feel. Not yet, at least. She nodded understandingly. Real love is complicated, isn't it? I thought I understood it once. But now I'm not so sure I ever did. Maybe none of us truly understand love until we lose it. I replied quietly, feeling my chest tighten slightly at the truth of my words. Laura's eyes softened, reflecting the firelight in a way that took my breath away. I suppose that's true. But maybe love isn't always something we lose. Maybe sometimes it's something we unexpectedly find right when we stop searching. We stared at each other for a moment that felt endless, the air around us charged and electric. I felt myself leaning in, just slightly drawn toward her without even realizing it. My breathing quickened as her eyes widened slightly, noticing my subtle movement. I paused abruptly, forcing myself to break eye contact, suddenly aware of how close I'd come to crossing a line. I'm sorry, I murmured quietly. I didn't mean to. Laura's voice was gentle and reassuring as she quickly interrupted me. Don't apologize, Jack. You didn't do anything wrong. We're both caught up in this moment, and it's natural. The tension between us didn't vanish. It lingered, gently wrapping around us like a comforting warmth. Neither of us moved away, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, I felt her hand gently rest against mine on the sofa cushion. We didn't speak again for several moments, content to simply exist in the quiet warmth we had created. Outside, the snowstorm continued its relentless fury, isolating us further from the rest of the world. Yet, in this cozy, hidden corner of the mountains, I felt closer to Laura than I'd ever felt to anyone else before. I woke suddenly, shivering slightly from the unexpected chill. At some point, I must have drifted off on the sofa, but now the cabin had grown noticeably colder. Outside, the storm continued to rage fiercely, the wind occasionally rattling the windows and reminding me just how isolated we truly were. Sitting up, I rubbed my eyes and glanced toward the fireplace. The flames had died down to a mere whisper, glowing faintly beneath smoldering embers. As I stood up quietly, intending to stoke the fire back to life, my heart jumped slightly when I realized Laura was still awake, sitting near the hearth, staring into the dying embers, lost in thought. Laura, I spoke softly, stepping closer. Are you all right? She startled slightly at my voice, turning quickly toward me. A soft, vulnerable smile appeared on her lips as she nodded gently. I couldn't sleep, she admitted quietly. It's too cold and there are too many thoughts running through my head. Let me fix the fire, I offered, immediately kneeling down beside her and carefully placing fresh logs over the embers. Soon, the flames rose gently, crackling back to life and casting a comforting glow around the room. Thanks, Jack, she murmured gratefully, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She shifted slightly to make room for me beside her, inviting me to sit. I joined her without hesitation, grateful for her warmth and sensing she wanted company more than solitude. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the soft crackling of the fire and the fierce howl of wind outside. Finally, Laura sighed deeply, leaning slightly into me as she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever feel like life just passed you by, Jack? Like you missed your chance at something truly important? Her voice quivered slightly as she spoke, vulnerability filling every word. I glanced down at her, seeing the raw emotion reflected in her eyes. My chest tightened with compassion, and without even thinking, I gently placed my hand on hers, squeezing softly in reassurance. Sometimes I admitted softly, I wonder if I've spent too much time hiding behind my camera watching life instead of living it. I worry I'll wake up one day and realize it's too late to change things. Laura nodded, leaning further into me, her voice thick with emotion. That's exactly how I feel. After my divorce, I thought everything would become clearer, that I'd finally get to live my life fully. But somehow, I've ended up feeling more lost than ever. Sometimes I wonder if I've missed my chance at happiness. Her words pierced my heart deeply, and I found myself turning toward her, gently cupping her hands between mine. Laura, it's never too late. I truly believe that. You're strong, beautiful, and caring. You deserve happiness more than anyone I know. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening, and for a moment her guard was completely down. She wasn't Mike's mother at that moment. She was just Laura, fragile, vulnerable, and deeply human. You really think that she whispered softly, searching my eyes for sincerity? Of course I do, I responded firmly, my voice filled with conviction. You've spent your whole life taking care of others, putting their needs before your own. Maybe it's time someone takes care of you for once. Laura's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she moved closer, leaning her head gently against my shoulder. It's strange, she murmured quietly, that someone so young can see me so clearly. Age doesn't always equal understanding, I replied softly, feeling my pulse quicken. Sometimes all it takes is seeing someone for who they truly are. She remained silent for several seconds, the weight of our conversation lingering between us. When she finally spoke again, her voice was tender, almost hesitant. Jack, I haven't allowed myself to get this close to anyone in so long. It's terrifying, but it also feels right. I don't understand how both those things can coexist. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I know exactly what you mean. Honestly, I didn't expect to feel like this either. But now that I do, I don't regret it for a second. Laura lifted her head slowly, turning to face me fully. Her eyes held mine, filled with intensity and uncertainty, and I realized suddenly just how deeply my feelings had grown. It scared me a little, yet at the same time it felt completely natural and right. I'm scared too, I confessed quietly, holding her gaze. But maybe this fear is worth it. Maybe this feeling between us means something. Her breath hitched slightly as she listened, her eyes softening. Jack, we both know this is complicated. I'm Mike's mom and you're his friend. But in this moment, none of that matters. All that matters is how safe I feel here with you. I feel the same, I whispered back sincerely. And I don't want to let fear or hesitation get in the way of what I'm feeling right now. Laura nodded softly, her eyes shining with quiet courage. Then let's not worry about tomorrow, or what might happen when we leave here. Tonight we can just be two people who found comfort in each other. Can we do that? I squeezed her hand gently, heart swelling with a new sense of certainty. Absolutely. A comfortable silence settled over us once more, as we sat side by side, wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence. The storm still raged fiercely outside, reminding us of our isolation, but inside the small cabin, something profound had shifted. Finally, Laura turned toward me again, her voice soft and hesitant. Jack, tell me, what's your biggest dream? I smiled slightly, reflecting on her question. Honestly, I've always dreamed of traveling, exploring new places, capturing the world through my lens. But lately, I think my dreams have started shifting towards something more personal, something deeper. She tilted her head curiously. How do you mean? I met her gaze, sincerity filling every word. I want someone to share those experiences with. Someone who understands me, who sees me clearly. Someone to hold on to through the storms, not just the literal ones, but the emotional ones too. Laura's expression softened deeply, her eyes full of quiet understanding and tenderness. That's a beautiful dream, Jack. And one day, you'll find that someone. Without even thinking, my words escaped softly yet with conviction. Maybe I already have. Laura inhaled sharply, eyes wide, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she slowly leaned forward, resting her forehead gently against mine, closing her eyes briefly. I felt her breath warm against my skin as she whispered softly, "Jack, right now, I just need you to know how much this means to me." I know, I replied, my voice gentle yet steady. It means everything to me, too. We stayed like that for a long while, foreheads touching, breathing, synchronized hearts beating rapidly in our chests. Outside, the storm showed no signs of stopping, but in this moment, within the walls of this small, isolated cabin, I felt safer and more deeply connected than I ever had before. I knew this night and the profound emotions it had uncovered would forever change the way I saw the world and the way I saw Laura. The storm intensified, battering the cabin relentlessly throughout the night. Outside, the snow piled up higher, burying every familiar shape beneath thick layers of white. The wind roared with renewed fury, occasionally rattling the windows and making the old walls creak ominously. Inside, our small sanctuary felt increasingly fragile. The warmth we had carefully maintained began to fade as our supply of firewood dwindled. I glanced anxiously at the empty basket near the fireplace, knowing we would soon have to venture out into the storm again. Laura noticed my glance and sighed, softly resigned. "We'll have to go out and gather more wood," she said quietly. "We won't make it through the night otherwise." I nodded solemnly, pulling on my thick coat and gloves. Laura bundled herself up quickly as well, her delicate features tense with worry. As we stepped toward the door, I turned to her, touching her shoulder lightly. "Stay close to me, Laura," I urged gently, my voice filled with concern. "The wind is strong and visibility will be low." She smiled bravely, nodding in understanding. "I will." Stepping outside felt like stepping into another world. The cold was immediate and biting the wind, whipping fiercely around us, blinding us with swirling snow. We carefully moved toward the pile of logs stacked against the side of the cabin, working quickly yet cautiously. As I reached down to grab another armful of wood, I heard Laura gasp sharply behind me. Turning quickly, my heart jumped into my throat when I saw her slip on a patch of hidden ice. She stumbled backward, losing her balance and falling heavily toward the snow-covered ground. Instinctively, I lunged toward her, dropping the logs as I caught her securely in my arms, pulling her close against my chest. My breath caught as I held her tightly, feeling her warmth pressed against me. Our faces were mere inches apart, our breaths mingling visibly in the freezing air. Time seemed to slow around us. The howling wind faded into the background as our eyes locked together, expressions filled with surprise, vulnerability, and something far deeper. Neither of us moved, unwilling or perhaps unable to break the intimate contact that had sparked so suddenly between us. "Are you okay?" I finally whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. Laura nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on mine, her hands gripping the front of my coat tightly. "I'm fine, thanks to you," she breathed softly. Her cheeks flushed not only from the cold but from the emotion running through her. My heart was pounding violently in my chest as I carefully helped her upright, though neither of us took a step away. We remained standing close, sheltered partially by the cabin wall from the harshest winds, wrapped in this unexpected yet powerful closeness. Laura's eyes searched mine, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Her voice came out as a gentle, hesitant whisper. "Jack, we—" She didn't finish the sentence, but I understood immediately what she was thinking. I took a slow, steady breath, finding courage deep within me. "I know," I said quietly, holding her gaze steadily. "Maybe we shouldn't. But right now, nothing has ever felt more right to me." Laura hesitated only a moment more, her eyes flickering with uncertainty before finally surrendering. She closed the tiny gap that remained between us, lifting her face gently toward mine. With my heart racing uncontrollably, I leaned down, slowly capturing her lips in a soft, careful kiss. At first, our kiss was cautious, tentative, filled with tenderness and unspoken vulnerability. But as the initial hesitation faded away, it became something deeper, more passionate, and intense. Laura's hands moved to rest gently against my chest, her fingers curling softly into the fabric of my coat as she leaned fully into me. I wrapped my arms protectively around her, holding her close, feeling her heart beating rapidly in sync with mine. Every thought of boundaries or hesitation dissolved in that moment, replaced by a certainty that I had never experienced before. The storm around us raged on, but we stood firmly together, shielded by our newfound connection. Finally, we slowly parted, both of us breathing heavily, eyes wide with wonder and quiet amazement. Laura's gaze softened as she touched my face gently, a hesitant smile forming on her lips. "Jack, we shouldn't," she whispered again, though her voice was now tinged with sadness rather than conviction. I reached up, covering her hand with mine, gently pressing her palm against my cheek. "But it feels right, Laura," I said firmly, determinedly. "You know it does." She sighed softly, conflicted yet unable to pull away. "It does feel right. More right than anything has in a long time," she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible above the wind. "But the reality, it's complicated." "I know," I replied, my voice steady and calm despite the storm still roaring around us. "And tomorrow we'll figure it out. But right now, let's just allow ourselves